Alright, today I'm looking at replacing the rear motor mount on this 2007 Pontiac Vibe, which for all intents and purposes is more or less a mechanical twin to the Toyota Matrix. Alright, I don't know how well the camera is showing this here. I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit and show the engine mount there. You can kind of see it. There's a bracket coming off the back of the engine or the transmission there, I think, and there's sort of a rubber donut in the middle, and then the rest of the mount bolts to the cross member under. Alright, so I'm under the car here where the engine mount kind of bolts to the frame, or a cross member in this case, and there's a couple of bolts that are going to have to be removed. Well, actually more than a couple, but there's this one nut here and this bolt that go up into the bottom mounting flange of the engine mount, and then down back here inside the cross member there's a couple of recesses, and there's a couple of I think those are nuts in there that need to come out. And you can kind of see this is all wet because I've soaked it down with PB Blaster just to kind of get everything going. And again, this is just the way that I'm doing this, not necessarily the right way. Okay, so I've got the bolt and the 3 nuts off from under the car, and that was a reasonably easy process. There wasn't too much rust, so all the nuts and bolts came off just fine. And I ended up using my 1/2-inch breaker bar and a 14mm socket. Okay, so I'm trying to show you can see the engine mount here. I've got the wheel off, and we're looking through the wheel opening into where the engine mount is, and you can see the engine mount is that bolt right there is the one I'm going to take off, and then the rubber part there is the actual engine mount. So what I've also got here is I've got a second jack underneath the transmission, and what I'm going to do is just put a tiny little bit of pressure on the transmission just to release some tension off of that mount, so that I can get the bolt off a little bit easier. Okay, and just kind of zooming out here, you can see the wheel opening, and then the second jack that I kind of put under the transmission. And again, you want to be careful you don't put too much pressure on there, or crack the housing, or bend your oil pan, or anything like that. Okay, so I used this arrangement of extensions and a breaker bar and a 17mm socket, and I was able to get that bolt out without hardly any trouble at all. And let's see, I'll have to reach in there and fish it out, but okay. So you can kind of see how that works. Okay, so here's the old engine mount that I've managed to get out of the car, and to get it out, I had to basically just kind of fish it up through the top of the engine, behind here. It was kind of tight quarters, and kind of had to fiddle around with it a little bit to kind of get it to clear the bracket that's on the back of the engine there. Okay, so I ended up getting the new engine mount at AutoZone. Normally I don't like to buy parts from there, but I kind of screwed up here, and I'm doing this job on a Sunday, and Napa wouldn't be able to get me their version of the part until tomorrow, and I want to put the car back together today. So I called AutoZone, and they had the part in stock, and this is what I ended up with. So that you can see there, that's the part number if you're going to get yours at AutoZone. Okay, so now comes the fun part, trying to fish this thing back down behind the engine and seat it where it's supposed to go. It goes in this orientation. The side with the single stud goes towards the engine, and the 2 shorter studs go towards the firewall. And it's just now going to be a matter of fishing that in behind the engine, and all the hoses and pipes and whatnot back there. Okay, so you can see the engine mount is in, and it actually went in a whole lot easier than I thought it would. And the trick was to put the engine mount in almost sideways to get it through the transmission bracket back there, or the part that's mounted to the transmission. So I turned it basically 90 degrees and got it under the bracket, and then turned it back so it's in its correct position, and then I was able to just kind of drop it in and line up the bolt holes. When it got to a certain point, it didn't want to seat all the way, so then I just got out one of my favorite tools here, my old pipe and a hammer, and just kind of lightly tapped it down into place, and then used the jack here to just kind of adjust the transmission and get that into position. And you can kind of see it there. Well, I guess the camera's not going to zoom now. There it goes. Now you can kind of see it's not perfectly lined up there just yet, but once I get the bolt in there, I can that'll just kind of move everything and align it. So that'll be the next step, is to put the bolt back through the mount. Okay, so in there, hopefully you're able to see sort of the engine mount lined up well, as best as I can get it to the transmission bracket. And I did that just by kind of playing around with the position of the mount and using the jack that I have under the transmission to just kind of maneuver things, and I've got it fairly well lined up. So I'm going to put the bolt in now, if I can find the camera here. But before I do, I'm just going to put a little bit of Never Sees on the threads, just in case I ever have to do this job again. And using an AutoZone part, that's probably more likely than I'd like it to be. But anyway, so I'm going to use my long extension here again and just kind of guide that in. And it seems like it's in. Now the trick is probably going to be to find the threads on the other side of the bracket. And I think that might have caught. First try. Feels like it caught anyway. Alright, so that's kind of hand tight, and then now we'll just torque it down with the ratchet. I'm sure that there is a recommended torque value on these things, but I'm just going to tighten it up. Not too tight, but tight enough to where it won't feel like it's going to come out. And I think that feels pretty good right there. So I think that's the hard part, and now just got to get the bolts on the bottom of the car now. Okay, so I've got all the bolts tightened up. The one bolt there on the right, that has to go up into the bracket, and then the other three nuts, the one that's sort of there to the left that you can see, and then the two that are recessed in the back there. And of course on each one of those I put some Never Sees. And again, I think there's probably a recommended torque value in your service manual. I don't have the service manual, and I'm just sort of tightening them up by feel. You don't certainly want to over tighten these and stretch the threads or crack the bolts or any of that sort of thing, but you don't want to under tighten them either.